Whether absorbing powers by touch, facing powerful opponents, or mastering the abilities of legendary heroes, Rogue has proven that her feats are almost limitless. With a mental resistance that challenges even the greatest telepaths and the ability to copy and use the powers of those she touches, she has already defeated some of Earth's strongest heroes, and that's what we'll explore in today's video. 12. A greater mental resistance than Xavier. This is the only feat of the character that doesn't involve stealing other powers. Due to her abilities, she is constantly dealing with other personalities in her mind. This has given her an incredible mental resistance, strong enough to withstand the most powerful telepaths in the publisher. Professor Xavier has already proven to be unable to invade her mind, as have Psylocke and the Shadow King, who has stated he is on the same level as Xavier. Possibly the only ones capable of invading her mind are Omega-level telepaths. Characters like Jean Grey, Kid Omega, and Exodus, who have considerable mental power, could do so. Another who might be able to invade her mind is Vulcan, as his energy powers directly affect the nervous system of the brain. But this is just me theorizing, not something that has actually happened. 11. 50-ton Warmup. Captain Marvel. One of the characters who suffered the most at the hands of Rogue was Captain Marvel. This is because at one point, Rogue absorbed both the powers and personality of Carol Danvers for an indefinite period. For several years, Rogue possessed Carol's powers. This meant she could fly, absorb, and project energy, move at super speed, and had super strength. Her strength was so immense that while training, she could warm up with 50 tons. She needed to do reps for 10 minutes before starting to sweat. Of course, she used this strength to destroy Sentinels with a single punch and things like that. It was one of the most powerful phases for the character, precisely because of Captain Marvel's strength. 10 defeated Wolverine and Iceman, Polaris. Rogue is a character who constantly fights against the heroes she calls allies. Whether due to mental control, external influence, or a personality she has absorbed, at some point, she will fight her friends. On this occasion, she absorbed the powers of Polaris, Magneto's daughter, who shares his metal manipulation abilities. Unfortunately, Wolverine was involved in the fight and suffered the consequences of having an adamantium skeleton. She used her powers to throw him, and in the process, shattered Iceman's entire body, defeating two powerful enemies with a single blow. 9. Overcame the fanatic, Magnum. Another character whose abilities were stolen by Rogue was Magnum. He is a character set to appear in the MCU, and his powers primarily revolve around energy manipulation. With these abilities, he gains various other attributes, such as flight, the ability to transform into energy, immortality, and super strength. Using this super strength, Rogue was able to face off against the Fanatic and match him for a few moments. Even though they were evenly matched in strength, she proved to be more cunning and used the villain's own weight against him, launching him away. 8. Power manifestation. One of the most interesting characteristics of Rogue's powers, which was simply discarded over time, is her ability to manifest absorbed powers. At certain moments, Rogue was able to unlock powers she had absorbed in the past and use them. In fact, she could do this with more than one power at a time. But I'm sure the writers realized that this ability would be too problematic to manage, as it would make her extremely powerful, so they made her return to her normal state. This happens frequently with the character, where she gains a power boost only to return to square one. For example, there was the time when she evolved her powers to no longer need to touch others to absorb their abilities. But over time, she simply returned to square one, needing to touch others once again. 7. Frozen Captain Marvel, Iceman. Thanks to Rogue absorbing the powers and personality of Captain Marvel, the two developed a fierce rivalry. Even while using the powers of her mutant allies, Rogue still defeated Carol Danvers. In this particular battle, Rogue was using Iceman's powers. The fight was balanced for a time, but eventually, Rogue proved to be superior. She completely froze Captain Marvel, but soon after, released her. Remember, Rogue has full access to the powers of those she touches, so she had the complete potential of one of the most powerful Omega-level mutants. This is confirmed when we recall that Captain Marvel, who is unaffected by the cold of space's vacuum, was still frozen alive. 5. Vaporized an enemy, Gambit. One of the most famous relationships within the mutant teams was between Rogue and the mutant Gambit. Since they were often together, it's obvious that she had almost constant access to his powers, as all she had to do was touch him. During an attack by an enemy, she used Gambit's powers at full capacity, something Gambit rarely does. We are usually accustomed to seeing Gambit explode small cards or objects, but at full power, his abilities are extremely lethal. By utilizing his molecular acceleration power, Rogue simply destroyed and vaporized her opponent upon touching them. It's somewhat terrifying how powerful Gambit's abilities can be, but fortunately, the character has a limitation in that he needs time to charge his power. He has shown the same potential that Rogue demonstrated in this effect, and if it weren't for the time limitation, he would definitely be an Omega-level mutant. 4. Outpowered Iron Man. She-Hulk. This can't even be considered a fight. It was a true massacre. It happened during the Avengers vs. X-Men saga, and one of the confrontations between the two teams was Rogue versus Iron Man. Rogue managed to get her hands on the powers of She-Hulk, one of the physically strongest characters on Earth, and gave Tony Stark no chance. His armor wasn't the best suited to fight a version of the Hulk, which made it much easier for Rogue. At one point, she became so enraged that she destroyed the armor with a well-placed punch. Even her X-Men allies were shocked by her brutality and questioned whether she was still in control or if the radiation had driven her mad. But she was still in control, despite her anger. 3. Outpowered all the Avengers. Rogue's official debut was quite a turbulent one for the Marvel heroes, as she appeared as a villain. After absorbing Captain Marvel's powers, she stormed the Avengers' mansion and managed to defeat them one by one. The first was Captain America, whose powers and life force were quickly absorbed. From there, she took down each hero, starting with Spider-Woman, then Thor and Vision. While absorbing the powers of those she encountered, she fortunately discovered that she was incapable of lifting Mjolnir. More than once, she has defeated Avengers members like Scarlet Witch, Hulk, Magnum, and several others that I've listed here. I'm sure her team members are very happy to know she's no longer a villain. 2. Can definitely kill Wolverine. Rogue's powers are on their own as lethal as the most powerful X-Men. Long-term absorption can be destructive for any being affected by it. Rogue has stated that even a brief touch could cause someone to faint for up to 12 hours. Wolverine himself has said that if Rogue maintained her touch on him, he would die permanently. Most likely, she would absorb both Logan's powers and his personality. What would happen is similar to what occurred with Captain Marvel, where the character essentially ceases to exist. Not even Wolverine's absurd regeneration would save him from this fate. That's because his regeneration would no longer be his, but Rogue's. 1. Copied almost all the Earth's heroes. After Professor Xavier's death at Cyclops' hands in Avengers vs. X-Men, Earth was judged as unworthy by the Celestials. Remember, the Celestials were responsible for creating life on the planet, and from time to time, they assess whether it was the right decision. At this point, Earth had already undergone numerous changes due to the Scarlet Witch's spells, including alterations to the timeline. With the imminent threat of a Celestial on Earth, the heroes united to transfer their powers to Rogue. This allowed her to receive the powers of dozens of heroes and hold the Celestial long enough. It took the help of the Sentinel to send the entity off-planet. However, the price for absorbing so many powers was her complete loss of control over her own abilities. Something Rogue had been training for years to master. But this event sent her back to square one.